Hey everybody! Welcome to Friday the 13th, the series. I'm your producer, Robert.
And I'm your guest, Jeremiah.
And after a complete, spoiler-filled recap of the episode, we are going to discuss the show you either just learned existed or always wondered how it existed. We promise the answers will be few and far between because we're just here to have some goofity fun exploring a show that, despite or possibly even because of its faults, isn't good and isn't so bad it's good, but is still somehow oddly charming. Let's dive in, shall we? Welcome to part 3 of our episode 12 retrospective. What can I say? We're good men and thorough. In a moment, Jeremiah and I will keep discussing the David Cronenberg episode. I'll recap the next portion of the story, and then I'll gaze into the future while he gazes into the past, and we'll meet in the present to try to predict if Friday the 13th, the series, takes place in the Springfield of its universe. At this point, you've probably either already watched this episode or decided not to, but just in case, you can still watch along with us for free on YouTube. We've provided a link on the Inner Demon Entertainment website. Now, on with some ambiguous spoon bending. You mentioned the spoon bending was on your list as well?
Yeah, the spoon bending is interesting because Jerry dismissed Jack's claim that this guy is doing it for real. But he does it with like an unrigged spoon.
I don't know. This seems like the kind of guy that might just keep a trick spoon standing by at all times.
Perhaps. But this is pre-internet, obviously.
Yes, pedants, we know it technically existed long before this show, but nobody was on it.
Yeah, no one was on the internet, so there wasn't any way to look up how does the spoon trick work. Jerry, likewise, doesn't explain how it was done in the show.
I'll go you one step further. Given that this is a show, and you don't have to even be a magician to pull off a spoon bending trick when you're a television show, I left it going like, did he even bend the spoon in the context of the scene? It kind of looks like it sort of starts to bend in the first shot, and then we cut away to Jack reacting. But the angle they cut back to, it doesn't look significantly bent. Like I was expecting it to be completely bent backwards, so the bottom of the bowl is touching the stem or something. I was picturing it practically tied into a knot by the time he was done because why not? It's television. You can do that. But the angle they chose, it doesn't even look bent. I guess it's his only spoon and he can't damage it too badly.
It's not bent that dramatically, and it's also, in the show, he doesn't say, for the audience's sake, it's just a deception of the eye. It doesn't mean this guy's really magic.
Strangely, this is one of those moments when it might have benefited the show to have Jerry or Jack just state the subtext. But Jack doesn't even react in the way that I would kind of expect for the scene to be clear, like rolling his eyes or saying like, yes, of course things can be faked, but you're just going to have to trust me, this magic is real.
Yeah, there's no acknowledgement of it as being real or fake at all.
It's ambiguous.
Yeah, a little odd the way that they presented it. Or didn't present it, really.
The way it sort of evolves or devolves, really. Couldn't agree more. What did you want to say about the Stewart apartment scene?
It's interesting that when they confront each other, Jerry is sort of threatening him. He's instantly combative, yet he's there because he wants him to cure him.
Yes, this threw me for a loop narratively as well. What is he actually trying to get out of this scene, given that he's already planning on double-crossing Jack?
I don't know if it's sort of like an example of him just not being able to break from his nature in a way, like he is just naturally lacking such respect for any faith healer, but he can't, even presented with this hope and belief that he's acting upon, that maybe this is real. He still can't let his cynicism and his lack of respect for anyone doing this, he can't let it go.
Well, I started down that road, but then I was trying to give the show credit, and I said he could just come in and say, heal me, but he'd have to either say, I'm very, very sorry, and maybe I'll publicly admit that I was wrong if you heal me, because what's in it for Stewart otherwise?
Well, if he goes on the show and it's like, look, here's the guy who embarrassed me.
Well, I absolutely agree he should be on the show, because no matter which way you cut it, that threw me for a loop when I watched that the first time. After this scene, I was certain we were going to get a scene at a real revival, but the last thing in the world I expected was to cut from this scene right back to the boat with Jack there, as if it was the same night. Yes, his clothes change. Yes, it's meant to be a different night. But it kind of feels like Jack just chilled on the boat while Jerry went off and had this meeting. And then we don't get any scene in a revival, but then later on, jumping ahead a little bit, Stewart comes to Jerry's place. The fact these scenes are happening in their homes was completely out of left field to me and really threw me off my rhythm in terms of what I expected from this show.
Yeah, I didn't mind it though.
I did. I found it very weird. But then again, the man lives on a frigate, so what am I saying? These things are happening at their homes.
I feel like Jerry isn't necessarily going to go straight to the show.
Seems a little odd to bring him right into your home. I mean, maybe an office.
I don't know that I necessarily picked up on exactly where they're meeting in that scene.
Well, I think it's a bordello/studio. There's a lamp with a red shade over it and the world's most sensual couch and a lot of antique furniture. I'm trying to figure out why Jerry doesn't come here, gun in pocket, say, hey, if you heal me now, I'll come on your show and repent. And then if Stewart says no, basically enact the same plan that he enacts on the boat, but just right here, right now.
I think to pull the gun out at this stage, he'd have to be farther along in that desperation for this to be real.
I mean, I guess, but we don't see any of that because of the compressed nature of this. We go boat, Stewart, boat, and by the next scene, he's taking Jack hostage.
Is the issue that he pulls the gun on Jack, or is the issue that why doesn't he pull the gun on Stewart?
Well, there's a few issues there, but it's more just that it seems to me the way the story presents itself, it doesn't feel like there's all this reflective time. We don't get an interstitial scene where Jerry's staring off to sea, thinking about his life, going to a church, deciding what exactly he believes in, turning any kind of corner mentally. It feels like this is all a fait accompli. Frankly, I think it's a little bit as ambiguous as the spoon bending. Jerry makes these decisions sometime, maybe in the scenes, maybe between the scenes. I don't feel like we, the audience, are ever really privy to it. So I don't know exactly what his motivations are at any given moment and when he's decided certain things.
I think it's happening on the screen, especially when we get to that second scene between the two of them on the boat. There's a lot that plays out there. There's actually a lot of really interesting character performance moments that happen in that scene.
Okay, but literally in the next scene, he takes Jack hostage and theoretically decides, if this is real, I'm going to kill Jack.
I don't think he says he's going to kill Jack.
Again, we don't see Jack explain the glove to him in terms of how it works, but he seems to understand the functionality of it based on the fact that he just stands by while Stewart explodes from internal bullet wounds later.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Let's put the bullet holes aside because that's...
Well, we've only been talking about Jerry's motivation. What about Stewart in this?
Stewart, I think, also gives a really good performance here, even though I don't know logically if it fully aligns. Because when he hears Jerry say that I'm dying, you can see him really give this expression that seems conflicted. Now, this is where the logic breaks of it, is that their history doesn't seem that extensive.
It does not.
Before the first scene in the show, I assumed that these two guys have never actually met face-to-face prior to that.
Right, because Jerry's not wearing a disguise.
That logical part does not make sense, that they would have this sense of history.
It's cool that Miguel Fernandez, who plays Stewart, thought to portray the character in such a complex way, but unfortunately that does seem to fight against what we're told in the story. Unless you want to justify... That's why Stewart, for some reason, is in the center of the room, and Jerry and the other people who've come to be healed are back against the wall way behind him, that somehow they got to this point in the event and he just never saw him back there because he doesn't look in that direction. It would kind of explain the weird staging.
You really do have to fill in a lot to do that.
But you have to do that all the time with this show.
Yeah.
You always have to headcanon to make it work.
There is a line in the second scene on the boat where he does say something like, all the time I've spent hating your guts. At the time I was like, so either 6 months or a year is what you're saying. And like, how much of that time did you really spend hating his guts? Because basically he came and ruined your life for 30 minutes and then you legitimately came an actual faith healer 30 minutes later.
In a very Judas kind of way, Jerry was kind of pivotal to his success. Ultimately.
Yeah.
Do you think that Stewart would want to perform this act in a more public space?
Perform it with Jerry?
Well, I mean, he thinks he's healing someone else. We're not privy to what exactly the plan is. All we know is that Stewart's surprised that he shows up. He's not surprised that he shows up on a frigate on which Jerry lives, but he's surprised that he shows up and the person he's meant to heal is Jerry. It just seems odd that it's not either meet me back here at my apartment on such and such a date, or we're doing this in a public spectacle because you shamed me in public, so now I'm going to shame you publicly and redeem myself publicly. But like, no, I'm going to come to your frigate.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Why go specifically to his territory to do it?
You're worried enough to bring a goon, but you're going to show up on his home turf.
Do you think that Stewart showed up actually planning to heal anybody?
I wondered that. That's one of my questions. Because, I mean, he legitimately heals people, presumably every night on the show, and then runs out and kills someone, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So he's fine both healing strangers and not. But what does he have to gain by showing up and not healing someone that Jerry presents him with? If you're taking the time out of your day to go to Jerry's place to do this, it seems like it's purely motivated out of pride, in which case you have to heal him. Which I guess then begs the question, is he going to touch Jerry and kill him? What is his plan? I don't know. I think you got a headcanon all of it.
Well, but he doesn't necessarily have to heal him right there in the moment.
Are they going to go to another location?
Well, no, but...
I mean, true, they're on a frigate. They can go anywhere in the world.
Could be like, okay, we'll book you for next week's show, but I want to see... Let me meet this person who's sick or dying or impaired in some way. And then you show up and it's just Jerry.
Well, okay. I'll headcanon that Stewart is the world's most petty man and is willing to dedicate multiple visits to strange locations just to show up one dude privately.
I mean, actually, that does kind of line up with Stewart.
I guess. Seems like he's got a faith healing empire to run, but I guess proving up Jerry is more important.
Empire is a strong word. The guy's got a little cable access show.
Which is weird, given that he has actual devil powers.
Right.
Also, I just want to point out how infuriating some of the audience will be that I've now established that we're calling Jerry's home a frigate, which it is not. I know it is not. It is not a frigate in any way, but I'm sure the kind of person that listens to this show, I'm guessing there's a healthy Venn diagram overlap with boat aficionados.
Right.
I don't know. It's not a destroyer. It's not an icebreaker. I don't know what it is. Doesn't even appear to be a cargo vessel, or at least there's no cargo crates stacked on it, but I'm sticking with frigate just to annoy people.
Send your hate letters in to...
Exactly. I was going to point out Jerry's reveal that he's suffering from cronitis. Looks like he fell asleep face down in a pile of Three Musketeer bars. Every condition in this episode has to be baffling and unknowable.
And extremely weird flesh oriented every time.
And they'll get weirder later when they start pulsating. Yeah, I don't know, man. I'm burnt out on this scene. You got anything else?
We kind of covered in a sense that, like, when he tells him to kneel down, the power play of that. And then how also, like, that also seems a little pseudo-sexual in a way.
Well, if you're saying that, then, Jeremiah, you're saying the entire Catholic Church is pseudo-sexual, and I'm not going to sit here and believe that.
Where's the evidence for this? Like, there's no history of anything ever.
Moving on. Wow. Third distinct establishing shot of Curious Goods. And Mickey and Ryan are just kicking it. It's a nice bit of visual continuity to bear witness to Ryan the Lion polishing the guitar we've seen around his living area. I refuse to call it a room in other episodes. But we missed a real opportunity to see him straightening Jack's lockpicks from earlier. Mickey is super concerned about Jack, but Ryan couldn't be more chill. Remember that for later, and don't worry, it won't be long. Kudos to this scene for ending with the best transition so far of the series. Ryan says, "Mickey, he'll be fine." She replies, "I hope so." And we cut to Jack, trussed like an apple-stuffed pork loin. Would have been even tighter without the "I hope so," but still great. There's no dearth of homoerotic subtext in this episode, so forgive me if I read too much into the fact Jack and Jerry are both merchant marines proficient at adapting their rope skills to restraining a grown man. Actually, after Jerry closes a steel door on Jack, he leans against it for a bizarrely long time, making a series of facial expressions one can only interpret as moving on. The 70s taught us there's no lower bound on how slow story pacing can be, and just when you think you've hit the limit, you can always add a shot of a car arriving and the occupants getting out. Friday, you are one apt pupil, because Stewart's arrival at Jerry's home/container vessel is beautifully staged but interminable. And this car is the world's longest luxury sedan, so we effectively have a car big enough to be called a boat beside a boat big enough to be called a ship. Stewart's hired goon waits outside Jerry's cabin, and presumably hones his shuffleboard skills, while Stewart discovers Jerry intends to be the one healed. It's funny Jeremiah speculates a second unit filmed the shots in Curious Goods and not Cronenberg, because this high-angle shot of Ryan searching for Jack's address book, with Mickey nervously pacing below, is among the most dynamic and interesting compositions of the series. Hey, remember a minute ago when I said to note that Mickey was anxious and Ryan completely mellow? Well, now Mickey is even more anxious, yet insistent they remain put, for some reason. Whereas Ryan the Lion is adamant they find Jack because he's certain Jack is in trouble. Somehow. All I can fathom is that this was an attempt at humor played so earnestly it just didn't land. Back on the destroyer-class houseboat, Stewart makes makes Jerry kneel before him and admit he now believes in the glory of the glove and that God is a superstition. Sorry, I don't know why I keep doing that. The ritualized humiliation over, Jerry spends 20 seconds groping his pecs through a wool cardigan only to declare, "It's still there." Weird, because he knew the glove had to be involved, and he knew Stewart touched him with his bare hand, not the glove. So what exactly Jack told him about the glove is now anyone's guess. This ambiguity and outright contradiction will compound on itself in just a moment, so hang in there. After a moment spent gloating over his victory, Stewart begins to leave, only to stop abruptly when Jerry pulls a gun and delivers the greatest line ever. "Heal me or I'll kill you." A bad idea for a myriad reasons, he fires a warning shot directly into a steel ceiling, which brings Stewart's goon running. History's most loyal henchman is immediately gunned down, which makes him my official winner of this episode's prestigious Job's Decoy Cooler Award. However, he did buy Stewart 1 second to escape, hence the award. Hey Jerry, where was the goon's warning shot? Despite possessing both a substantial head start and the gait of a frightened gazelle, Jerry manages to put at least one bullet through Stewart as he reaches his car. In a stroke of genius, Stewart realizes the glove can be used on wounds as well as ailments, heals himself, and becomes a vessel for John Malkovich, I presume. The dead henchmen figure the docks at night are a safe place to leave the keys in the ignition, so Stewart is off to the races before Jerry can finish the job. Despite having just healed himself, despite being pursued by a dying man on foot, Stewart speeds and weaves wildly, eventually crashing not into a cargo container or an industrial dumpster, but the empty space between them. What do I mean by that? I don't know. All I can do is try to describe what I'm seeing in words that fail me. But no, not exactly a Dukes of Hazzard level cliffhanger as we go to commercial. If you like the horror genre as much as we do, you can preview the horror comic book Requiem for a Psychopath right now, for free, at the Inner Demon Entertainment website. Imagine a world in which horror film slashers are real, then imagine a troubled teen bringing one out of retirement to help him take revenge on his bullies. It was written by me and drawn by friend of the show, Stephen Yu. Again, that's Requiem for a Psychopath on the Inner Demon Entertainment website. And, if you dig it, please either review and rate it 5 stars on Amazon, or don't rate and review it at all. Ratings of less than 5 stars send the algorithm into murder mode for some reason. Thanks. I hope you enjoy it. I don't know if you noticed it, given how dark the episode is, but remember when you were fondly speaking of Jack's comment about what sort of person would bend a man's lockpicks? I didn't realize it the first several times I watched that scene, but Ryan is actually trying to straighten them.
Oh, yeah.
It's really endearing.
Yeah, he's trying to make it right. No, that's what's so... I still love that scene. That scene is just so... Jack's performance, and then Mickey's sort of like, oh, poor guy. They all play a part in that scene that's just really endearing and funny.
I want to legitimately give the show credit wherever I can. And I have to say, that transition between Mickey's "I'm sure Jack will be all right" hard cut to Jack tied up head to toe as we learn that Jerry is clearly into some serious shibari.
Yes.
Absolutely amazing.
Yes.
Clearly learned as merchant marines sailing around Japan. Brilliant cut. Very funny.
Yeah, that worked great.
Let's do a mini version of the question I once asked Hill Street in the Great Montaro episode. 80s gay.
Mm-hmm.
Do we think Stewart's gay?
Oh, it's interesting. Like in that, yeah, sort of that.
It's skirting the edge way you could only get away with in the 80s?
Yeah, it's possible. I don't know if I'd say it definitively.
Well, you really can't. That's what makes it 80s gay. There's always a question mark at the end of that.
Right.
My lack of inflection notwithstanding.
Yeah, I mean, there are some examples, though, where it's, like, very clear.
Well, do you remember the Great Montaro episode? Episode 6, I think, The Magician.
I do.
There is a magician and his male sidekick, and I'll just say that was ripe material to have this same conversation.
That was sort of a bit of a reference to the movie Terror Train, which was early 80s, Jamie Lee Curtis, post-Halloween.
It had gay magicians in it?
Well, it had David Copperfield actually in it, playing the magician.
What?
David Copperfield was playing a role.
Is that the only movie he's ever done, or is...
I think it's really probably his biggest role in the sense that it's not him playing himself. Yeah, if I remember right, spoiler alert for 1980s Terror Train. I think the twist at the end of that movie, if I recall it correctly, basically the killer is getting revenge on a bunch of people who did the killer wrong back in the day, and now they're all like teenagers or college kids. So we're sort of hunting for, we think it's this boy, and then at the end it turns out it's the sexy assistant who is the boy. Does that sound right? Does that sort of line up with the episode since you've seen it more recently?
I mean, in that they're magicians. I can tell you definitively, neither of them turns out to be the killer.
So what I'm trying to recall, and let's do this in a way where we can cut it out.
This is all getting cut out. We've gone so far afield.
Yeah.
Talking about the film career of David Copperfield, what a question about is Stewart gay?
So in the episode, was there a cross-dressing element to it?
In that case, it's the male magician that we only meet as a female when performing, and then when we meet in their male guise, they're dead.
Terror Train has David Copperfield's female assistant, who is a sexy female. And then at the end, it is like the female assistant is a male.
How many films are we spoiling, Jeremiah?
Yes. So many.
They really... that one, I'll tell you.
So let me tell you about Rosebud and Kaiser Soze.
Was there any surprises in Tu Wong Fu? Thanks for everything, Julie Newmar. Or no, I guess we just knew from the beginning, right?
Let's find a way to get back on track. Let's get this Terror Train back on track.
Long story short, jury's still out on Stewart's sexuality, subject we probably shouldn't even be diving into in the first place. So did you have anything else here? Because I was actually going to pay some more respect to the very next scene, which is a beautifully filmed shot reverse shot with Ryan upstairs in Curious Goods and Mickey downstairs. It's well lit, it's well composed, it's staged in depth, not just in 2 dimensions, but 3. I think you know what I mean by that.
Yep.
I'm not talking to you, but pedants of the world. This would be one, though, that you think was probably shot by his second unit, not Cronenberg himself.
If I had to guess, I would say yeah. It was very well staged and well put together of a shot, well lit, all those things. But from the direction of it, I don't feel like it had the Cronenberg elements to it.
Oh, I'm not questioning it. Given the content of the scene being filmed and how pointless/contradictory it is, I'll walk it back. It's not pointless, but it does seem contradictory. Even Mickey seems to point out in the episode that it doesn't make a ton of sense, but they need a motivation to get him to the ship. So Ryan is suddenly worried, even though he was perfectly calm last scene.
Yeah, it is just a scene that established 2 things. Number 1, we got to get these characters from point A to point B. And number 2, by the way, don't forget about these 2 characters because they're stars of your show.
You've had a lot of thoughts on the whole faux healing scene in which Stewart does not, in fact, heal Jerry, but just kind of jerks him around. The tonal whiplash you get with this show, where you have all that complexity followed immediately with Jerry from the ground whipping out a gun, pointing it at Stewart and saying, "Heal me or I'll kill you."
Yes.
Which, slightly more ironically, I'm saying that's the best line of the episode. Possibly the best line ever.
I mean, that should be a movie title, frankly.
I agree. There probably is some obscure New York grindhouse film from the early 70s called "Heal Me or I'll Kill You."
Heal me or I'll kill you. Yeah, that's your double feature you drive in.
That schlock is followed with him firing at his own steel ceiling, and then the goon comes running in down the stairs. The goon clearly killed in that he grabs his chest and falls down the last couple stairs, but there's also a clang, like a ricocheted bullet sparking off of the railing, which I guess is meant to be the bullet going clean through and then hitting the railing. And on the one hand, I really applaud the production value that comes with taking the time to rig that effect and everything. But at the same time, this is the most baffling shooting I've experienced since Pulp Fiction, where I'm not sure if a man is dead or not.
I want to back this up just a tad.
Please.
He fires the gun. Obviously, that signals the driver/goon to come running in. But the cut is goon about 3 steps down.
Yep.
But it's not him rushing through the door. He's already in the door, stopped to close it behind him. Right. Off screen, though. Like, instead of jump cut of him barging through the door, It's him 3 steps in, door closed behind him, running down the stairs. And then he says something that I'm not sure. I actually did rewind this a couple of times to try to make out what he says. It's clearly an ADR line, but it sounds like him barking.
I think I only caught one word out of it, but I thought that word was boss.
It was like one syllable, which made me go to the bark sound, but I could not make out that it was boss, and I rewound it half a dozen times. As you pointed out, there's the spark, but you're not quite sure if he said it or not. But he also lets out this pretty hilarious sound of him dying. Where it's like this, I can't even imitate it, but it's him
improvising his own Wilhelm scream.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just weird. Just weird.
Yes, everything becomes farcical, toot sweet.
And as I said, this was preceded with great performances that are very dramatic and complex. And now we get this almost Three Stooges level farcical thing going on with goon/driver coming down the stairs.
And now there's a chase scene in which you almost expect them to stop and play shuffleboard or something. It's so absurd.
Closer to Buster Keaton.
You could easily play yakety sax over what follows.
Right. Yeah.
Stewart gets shot, gets in the car, drives off. Right at the moment I'm willing to tip my hat to the show, I see a car crash in which this car is either going to careen into a shipping container or the big dumpster, and it manages to crash into this empty space between them.
Yes.
I've never seen a car chase end that way. I didn't know you could do car chases that way. So I didn't know that was the third option, the empty space between the two obvious threats.
A lot that happens in that empty space.
I guess it's like jazz. It's the objects that you don't see that you crash into. With Stewart trapped in his car, his glove a ticking time bomb, and Jerry on the hood laughing maniacally as Stewart begs 100 times for help, we actually have a situation oddly reminiscent of Dolan's Cadillac, the Stephen King short story Peter and I discussed while reviewing the previous episode. At least we would, if Stewart was actually trapped, but he has ample room to climb out his window if he just put it down farther. But this was before the days of power windows, and those window cranks could be a real bear, so I get it. The glove has a bullet hole, which we get a great view of as Stewart reaches through the partially open window in a desperate effort to touch Jerry. But Jerry's no fool and waits patiently until Stewart erupts with bullet holes like he's an innocent bystander in a Paul Verhoeven film. With the glove now in Jerry's possession, it's time for everything to stop making sense. Let's start with the big ticket stuff and work our way down to the nitty-gritty. First, Jerry could use the glove on literally anyone, including someone dying in a hospital, yet he chooses to kill his old friend Jack. This could have been easily justified if Stewart or his goon had managed to seriously injure Jerry before being shot to create a ticking clock, but that didn't happen. Second, despite having Jack locked in a closet, Jerry doesn't heal himself, then simply touch Jack, but instead opens the door to discover Jack has freed himself of the ropes. In the show's effort to hand-wave this happy accident, Jerry even says, "How convenient, you got loose." Yes, Jerry, that is convenient for the plot, since Jack would be a sitting duck otherwise. However, Jerry actually exacerbates his declining control of the situation by having Jack step out of the closet and sit on his bed. Quick interlude as Mickey and Ryan arrive on bicycles, possibly the last vehicle one selects when attempting to build tension. Full-blown chronitis has set in, as Jerry's wounds are now pulsing and producing squishing sounds. This feels indulgent and lore-breaking at first, but I guess it's technically possible everyone else's ailments came to life like this, and it either happened off-screen, was covered by clothing, and/or was of a type that would behave differently, so I'll give this a pass. And hey, Jack is finally well lit. Probably because it's a tight shot away from the walls, so they didn't have to rely on practical fixtures. Back to things that don't make sense. 3. Jerry now drops his gun. I know you can't kill Jack with a gun, but you could still threaten him, and, hate to say it, but even shoot him, as long as he's still alive when you touch him with the glove. Instead, we have to indulge the show in a game of geriatric tag, in which you can't not imagine the cast of MST3K riffing, "Does this bug you? I'm not touching you." Fourth, and final, Jack grabs Jerry's arm and makes him touch his own face. If you can witness this and not hear an endless loop of Nelson Muntz saying, "Stop healing yourself, stop healing yourself," you're a better person than I. Based on what happened to Stewart, all Jack really needed to do was run out the clock. But I guess this works too. finally burning through the show's effects budget for the year. Now, both portions of Jerry's head and the glove itself bulge and pulse as Jerry implores, "Pray for me, Jack." Given how destroyed his face is, I was half expecting, "Jesus wept." As is their wont, Mickey and Ryan the Lion arrive moments too late to do anything except watch a man finish dying. And Mickey, I see you took the time to don a saucy French beret. It's quite fetching, but read the room. In a possible bit of serialized storytelling, she looks away slightly, but both she and Ryan the Lion have become so jaded they're pretty much indifferent to discovering what looks like Weequay if Salacious Crumb swapped out his moisturizer to amuse Jabba. Jack explained that the glove not only absorbs the ailment of an individual, but then must amplify it because everyone who's on the receiving end ends up far, far worse than the person who was healed, which, I gotta be honest, it does answer a question I wasn't even asking. That's one of those things I was just willing to go with for the sake of enjoyment of some fiction and suspend my disbelief. But I'm wondering if that's actually a setup for this shootout, as the trapped Stewart has to contend with the fact that he can't release the energy of the bullet wound he's absorbed and is eventually killed by not one, but about 6 or 7 squibs going off in the way that only 80s squibs can.
Yeah, I had a real note about this, and I'm so conflicted.
Well, I would hope.
And on one hand, I feel like at that time in his career, coming off of Videodrome, Cronenberg would actually want the bullets. He would want that sort of surrealist element of it. Whereas in the logic of the show, it should just be that his body would just suddenly have all these gaping wounds, but not that we'd hear gunfire. It seems sort of out of character for the show in my mind. What's your thoughts on that, having watched these episodes more recently?
When I think of Cronenberg, I think body horror, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really think Squibfest. Who do you associate Squibfest with? And I'd say Paul Verhoeven.
Sure.
It doesn't seem like such a Cronenberg thing to me, but I've only seen maybe a third of his films. Granted, I guess he had the greatest squib of all time with Scanners.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Take that, me. But that's not something I necessarily associate with his work. I wouldn't have said, oh, that's probably something he really wanted to get in there. Granted, I can't imagine the network really wanting to get that in there either. So who is that for? I don't know.
I don't necessarily associate him with Squibfest outside of, like, yeah, obviously Scan. But I think just the surrealistic reality of that, presented in the most dramatic way possible, even if it's almost surreal.
Honestly, this is one of those times I was at a loss. I did not understand why Jerry was just chilling. Jerry, are you out of bullets? Or are you planning some kind of elaborate torture? And then when he exploded from the inside out with all those bullets, I did not understand what was happening until I thought about it. And it was only in subsequent viewings that I saw, oh, okay, he's got a bullet hole through the glove. The bullet is the thing. Because I wasn't thinking of it in terms of injuries. I was thinking of it in terms of healing the sick. Why are we splitting hairs here with regard to medical conditions? I don't know. But it certainly struck me as something out of left field where I had to completely reorient myself and figure out what was even going on and reverse engineer the way the glove works. When he exploded like a piñata, I was like, what is going on? Because up until now, we haven't seen him even be concerned about that. Okay, I guess we do, but it didn't read that way at the time. Because the show doesn't explain how the glove works and just lets you figure it out. Honestly, I wasn't under the real impression there was a serious ticking clock.
Well, this clock is running way faster here than what it's ever run before.
Right. On the one hand, he's shooting TV episodes seemingly without a care. On the other hand, he's rushing out of revivals to find someone in an alley, to this one where he's dead within a minute.
Right.
Makes it hard to keep track of what's going on and see how all the gears fit together when the gears seem to be different sizes at different times. Traveling backwards through it like I'm Christopher Nolan. Maybe that's some of the explanation for why there's that earlier highly expositional line we do get about how the glove works. It not only absorbs but amplifies.
You were just completely lost then.
I did not understand what Jerry was doing, mostly because I've never been 100% clear on what exactly Jack did and didn't tell him off screen about how the glove works.
How does anybody know exactly how this glove works at all is obviously a question. But there could be a question of, just because we hadn't seen it at that point, of can someone heal themselves?
Circling back to cataracts in a wheelchair, also, if you have two ailments, does the glove choose one, or is it a panacea? Or what if Stewart, as far as we know, I guess he was the spitting image of health, but what if he rolled up in a wheelchair and picked up the glove? Could he then walk?
We assume it has to be on someone, and we assume that they have to actively touch themselves.
Actively touch themselves? Because that's going to get us to pretty much the next scene in which Jerry is forced to touch himself.
Well, maybe not actively touch themselves, but I guess what I'm saying is like having the glove on.
If you have the glove on and you trip and fall, and for whatever reason your hand, ends up underneath your body and you touch yourself,
That counts, I would think.
then again, I guess if you're in good health, then even if the glove builds that up and sends it back into you, you're still fine. 0 times any other number is still 0.
Well, and as you said, like, people can have a number of things wrong with them. So, like, what if someone suffers from erectile dysfunction? Is that...
Asking for a friend?
Yeah, was Stewart constantly both having his hand infected with cancer, but also, like, having just a huge boner as he's going around looking for someone to pass it off to?
Someone's been reading my fanfic.
I mean, it would explain some of the caressing we were watching earlier, so...
Oh, so much is explained with that alarming question, Jeremiah. I mean, that's the kind of question I don't want answered. Can a banana grab another banana? I mean, that's the kind of question I don't want answered. You don't have any thoughts on what a real jerk move it was, using the glove on Jack when, as far as Jerry knew, Jack is still tied up? Go find someone. He specifically comes back and he's going to use it on Jack. Like, he wasn't dying in the moment.
Well, to tell you the truth, and actually this did occur to me earlier and I forgot to mention it, Jerry does seem like he's on his death's bed, even though there's no reason to think that he is.
Agreed.
As this thing is winding down and escalating, you do start to wonder, like, okay, so Jerry's dying, but is that 6 months or 6 hours or 6 minutes? I'm not sure how much time Jerry thinks he has left on this earth.
Well, yeah, because he acts like James DeBello in Cabin Fever, wanting to do all his acting from the couch. He's like prone for half his scenes on a bed.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. Yeah, and even like earlier during scenes with him and Jack, he's laying down when no one, including the audience, knows that he's sick and dying yet.
But I can understand why my man Crackerjack Marshak is so bent out of shape at the end of the episode. I mean, talk about a betrayal.
Is this the episode you feel like we've explored Jack the most? Again, the main characters are really Jerry and Stewart.
Absolutely. In fact, this, oddly enough, answers a previous crystal ball question I did way back with Hill Street, in which I asked, will Jack Marshak ever get an episode without Mickey and Ryan? And if not, will he at least be the focus of the episode with them just kind of playing supporting roles? I actually have to go back and listen to that one now to see what she and I said, because I don't recall. But we asked that question, and I think this definitively answers it.
Well, although to a degree, he's also playing a supporting role.
Yes, but I mean, like you said, that's kind of true of all of them. So
Right.
I don't see a scenario. I don't think we're going to get a one-man show. It's a 45-minute long monologue with Jack in a spotlight addressing the camera. He's always going to be the monster of the week and the supporting players. But given that he's not just investigating, but this is getting into his history with an old friend, yeah, absolutely.
There are 3 characters that are going through something and evolving at all through this episode, and it's Stewart, it's Jerry, and it's Jack. Is this exploring Jack's faith the most that we've seen? Because we've sort of established that Jack's sort of both the historian, but also a very religious person.
You mentioned that last episode, but I mean, honestly, I can't really answer your question because I didn't ever come away with the impression that I had that much information to draw on about his actual beliefs, other than obviously he knows the supernatural is real, but I've never seen him show preference to a religion, if that's what you're asking.
So this might really kind of be establishing it, that he has always been this guy of faith.
Meaning he's a Christian?
I mean, I don't know that you have to give a specific denomination, but yeah, I mean, more or less, probably some sort of Jesuit or something like that.
If that were the case, though, I feel like there should be some indication that he's personally offended at what Stewart's doing with regard to representing faith and some denomination, but
Well,
I didn't get any sense that he was personally offended or anything about this being an affront to God or an affront to a specific faith.
he wasn't offended, but he did seem to have this difference of opinion that did get discussed in that first scene with Jack and Jerry, where he's like, all this time you haven't found, like he has a hard time with that, as if Jack knows that there's con men out there, but that he also, as a man of faith, believes there's a reality to it, and therefore there should be somebody out there who is doing this and doesn't get it from the devil. That there should be people out there that are actually performing miracles.
Based on what he's seen, it seems like his denomination should be Satanism, because he's sure that one's real.
Well, yeah, he's sure that one's real. But I think that actually plays into that scene where he sort of expresses a disappointment in the fact that
Jerry hasn't found someone that seems to be the real deal regarding the other side of the coin.
Yeah. It's like, I've debunked 400 people or whatever the number was. And he's like, not one of them? Like, that's a hard thing for him to grasp, that he's not come across one yet.
So he's Mulder, but instead of aliens, he knows the supernatural is absolutely real, and he just wants some proof that God is real.
Mulder was always the first one to identify the aliens when they were doing something, but he was also the first one to identify when someone was faking it. Like, well, no. That's not how the aliens work. That's how government works, or that's how, like, people get led into false beliefs about aliens and things like that.
Don't want you to answer this for fear of spoiling anything, but I'm just wondering if some of your conclusions about these characters are derived from your knowledge of future episodes. Whereas I'm only looking at the first 12 and going, do I see any evidence of that so far? But there's a lot more show to come.
Yeah, that's definitely possible. And, as I said, even when I was watching these originally, I didn't see them in order. So who knows what was informing me at any given point on any given episode. There definitely are things that will continue to come up that sort of establishes Jack's point of view on things. But you sort of feel like the cousins are more, prior to them coming across this, they would have probably been more like, I don't really believe in stuff like this. And Jack's very quickly a believer. Stopping the devil is almost like a spiritual mission for him already. Whereas Mickey and Ryan, it's like, okay, this is a personal thing that we saw and feel some degree of responsibility for, because we sold some of these objects unknowingly. And either way, like, this sort of came from our family. And now that we know, now that we're wrapped up in this, we have a responsibility. And Jack sort of enters the fray also with that, but with the added element of all this time, I've been helping the devil get these objects. And that is so counter who I am as this man of faith. Much like the priest at the beginning of Exorcist who's out in the desert.
Ooh, I like that image for Cracker Jack Marshak.
Yeah, he's the scholarly man of faith.
Well, there we go. You just cracked it, Jeremiah. So Jack's a warrior Jesuit fighting Satan, and Mickey and Ryan are Jewish and doing it out of a strong sense of guilt. Close the books on that one.
There we go. Everyone's represented.
Yeah, this next little bit, I like to think, actually, that the previous fingers in eyes to remove context scene was actually to establish this idea and get us used to it, so that we now accept Jack grabbing Jerry's arm and bending it around so he's touching himself.
Yeah.
That was meant to prime us so we'd accept it later at the denouement.
The staging is weird on that. I mean, Jack is a much...
Yes, no, the staging, Jeremiah. That's the problem with the way this plays out.
Again, stuff on the page, if you don't think about it and then you don't fix it when you get to the set, this is what you end up with, where it's a little awkward. It is like Jack being the big brother, making him punch himself in the face.
Everything about it, from Jack disarming a man who's got a gun trained on him from across the room to, oh, that's right, I take it back. I'm glad I'm watching this as we're discussing. Jerry stands up and just gives up the gun, just drops it on the floor, and is like, nope, I got this. Time to go touch him, and that'll be that.
That's going to be all I got to do.
Why have a plan B when you got a plan A like this? My heart breaks for both these fine actors that they had to engage in that farce. Getting back to your point, getting heavy for a second, Jerry's final words, pray for me, Jack. So in the end, do we think Jerry found religion, or did he have it all along, and that's why he's so bent on exposing all these frauds?
No, I think it's a little bit of the final irony, and then it's obviously Jerry sort of has to have turned around on some of his beliefs, in the sense that there's no denying what's happening to him now. I can't pray for myself because that's not who I am, so I need you to pray for me.
Yeah, it's fair. And then after that profound moment, I have to admit, I'm kind of taken out of the scene when Mickey and Ryan come downstairs and it's revealed that Mickey took the time to don a saucy French beret before running out to save Jack. My only thought is, not the time or the place, Mickey.
Well, that oceanfront breeze, you need a little extra head protection.
I guess. She's off to our audition for the Guardian Angels after this.
Right.
Read the room, girl.
Welcome to Crystal Ball, the segment where we gaze into the future and let time make fools of us all.
You've seen every episode at least once, many of these episodes 2 or more times. So this is going to be more of a memory test or observation test than testing your ability to predict the future. But let me ask you a question and see how well you remember the show.
Sounds great.
You and I have discussed the Canadianness versus Americanness of this show. And in episode 7, Dr. Jack, we do see American currency. At least, I'm pretty sure. It's always a little bit tricky to see something in that level of detail, given the quality of, you see what we have to work with. Quality of the footage that we're able to see without a remastered version of this thing being put out. So yes, the show establishes that it takes place in America. Are we ever going to establish where specifically it takes place, state or city?
Oh, interesting.
Don't think too long. Top of your head.
I don't think so. If it wasn't established at all in the pilot as a line somewhere, I doubt if it ever comes up specifically.
Up to this point, to the best of my knowledge, it is not established.
Now, it might be one of those things sort of like where exactly do the Simpsons live in terms of state, where like you can start to put clues and you can start to like go, well, they're this far from the Grand Canyon, but they're also only this far from the Statue of Liberty. So
yeah, no, I'm not asking you to triangulate coordinates, to use geolocation or anything. I'm just asking, I'll put it this way. To the best of my knowledge, I haven't been able to make out the license plate on the Winchester Mobile. I don't think we ever get a good angle of it, and I think it might actually be black, like it's Uber custom or something. But given how dark these shots typically are, I'm not probably ever going to be able to make it out, even if we get a close-up of it. To my knowledge, that's the only thing that we could have even really have had the chance. The only thing that gives away their position other than Ryan wearing a hockey sweater, but again, that takes us to Canada, and we already ruled that out. The show definitely takes place in America, so I'm stumped at this point.
well, and also, like, if I recall correctly from the pilot, they don't live in that town where the shop is. They're coming there basically to inherit it, and then I think Mickey wants to sell it, and Ryan's more interested in like, oh, we could kind of turn this into a business.
Yep. Once again, that's all correct.
But until they both become aware that it's cursed items and that there's some sort of moral responsibility, they're just in town to settle the estate. So where they're from is not going to help. I wonder if like maybe police badges or police cars.
Oh.
That might be a good clue. If you look at the costumes, a lot of times your NYPD or Chicago PD or LAPD would be somewhere on the costume or the cars themselves.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Newspapers.
Yeah, we never see those things in close-ups. The show doesn't tend to use a lot of inserts and close-ups. A lot of things play out in a master. I wonder why.
Yeah. No, that's very true. And if they didn't specifically say, "Oh, this is in New York or Chicago or Boston," which I sort of picture being probably one of those cities, it's probably an intention not to tell us where it is. I think that they just probably, if they never intentionally specify, they probably want to keep it generic enough to where it could be anywhere.
Whoa, easy there, Tiger, because now you're kind of stepping on my crack at this. Normally, both of us take a stab at it. I actually have no future knowledge, but you basically just articulated exactly what I was going to say. I get the sense that they want this to sort of be Anywhere USA, and I'm kind of basing that on the fact that even in the Road episode, Scarecrow, the previous episode, just for the fun of it, I'll guess there's probably going to be some more of those too, where they go a bit abroad. Not that I'm ever actually sure where these episodes are taking place. For all I know, some of the ones set in cities could be an entirely different city. I always just assume they're happening locally, but that doesn't actually make sense because how many of these objects are actually still local? So they've got to be going around to other cities too. But I guess just to my point, the Scarecrow episode where they're really on the road in a very supernatural kind of way really just sells me on the idea that, hey, if they didn't establish even where they were then, when they weren't even at home base, then they're probably never going to establish home base.
Yeah, and I would think especially, because as we talked about before, it's sort of mixing in anthology and serialized formats. And with an anthology show, you may want to go somewhere very quickly. So you don't want it to be like, oh, we have to get our main characters on a plane in order to get to a river. If we establish that it's in a place where there really aren't any major riverways by it, and we decide we want to do that, or send them to a lake, or send them to the desert, or send them to the country. By keeping it vague, you are sort of sticking to things that will help your anthology-style drama be able to go anywhere it wants to go.
We need a town with a nuclear power plant and a gorge.
Yes, absolutely. There's legalized gambling, but also, yeah.
Okay, well, we're on the same page then. Well, we'll see how that bears out.
Yeah, or we won't.
No, Sorry, that was my attempt at a sign-off line. So
Okay.
just trying to put a bow on that for the sake of the segment. Yeah, we can't believe we're still talking about this episode either. But we've got one more in us, so we're going to Andy Kaufman this thing to the bitter end. To be fair, wrapping up this episode won't take long, and we'll mostly discuss how it slots into Cronenberg's incredibly unique career. Yep, Friday the 13th, the series, and a deep dive into body horror. Chocolate in your peanut butter in your chocolate. All in 3 weeks. We'll see you then. Thanks for listening, everyone. We know you have a lot of choices when choosing a Friday the 13th, the series podcast, and we sincerely thank you for choosing ours. Special thanks to Joshua Romeo for original music and to Stephen Yu for original art. And be sure to check out the Joe on Joe podcast, the only podcast where Joe Schlepsky discusses G.I. Joe. If you want to support our show, you can leave a review and rate us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. If you want an occasional update on our projects, you can sign up for our newsletter at the Inner Demon Entertainment website. And if you want to complain about social media with us on social media, you can find links on our website. And always remember what Carl said to Frylock. It don't matter. None of this matters. Good night, everybody.